Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back. Oh man, something in my throat. Today we are back with some more of the Great War, this time week 185, Austro-Hungarian House of Cards. I never watched the show House of Cards. There's going to be references here, I'm not going to understand them. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch. And please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube, where I upload old stream VODs and dumb clips. A lot of dumb clips. Way too many dumb clips. Anyways, let's dive right in.
The battles have been fought in the field for 42 months now, back and forth,
God dang
all
it.
over the world. And at home, in the political machines of the warring nations and empires, it's maneuver and outmaneuver, not just against the enemy, but against your own. In fact, by this time in Austria-Hungary, it very much is a house of cards.
Or is he making reference to, like, the instability of, like, you know, building a house out of cards? Which, of course, is also a reference to the show, I think. I don't know. God, I'm gonna shut up. Was House of Cards out when when they were doing the Great War? I think it had to be, right? Man, I don't know time.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week was a week of aerial bombardment in the Western European skies. There were mutinies in both the Austrian Navy and the Greek Army, worker strikes in Germany, political machinations between the German government and German Army Command, and other machinations between the British government and British Army Command. And that drama continued to develop this week.
Woo!
British Army Chief of Staff Willie Robertson refused to agree that the British representative on the Allied Supreme War Council at Versailles should be a Deputy Chief of Staff and a member of the British Army Council. That would give that man the right to issue independent orders to the Army. Prime Minister David Lloyd George then offered Robertson a choice: remain in London as Chief of Staff but with reduced powers, or accept a demotion to the Versailles job. Robertson argued that the Chief of Staff should himself be the Versailles delegate, or if not, that the delegate should be a subordinate to the chief. Lloyd George even apparently attempted to have Robertson swap jobs with General Herbert Plumer, offering Plumer the job of chief, which Plumer refused. If this sounds confusing, don't worry, it'll only get worse.
No,
There was
damn it, I'm already lost in all that sauce, man. Britain. Of course, the British that make things unnecessarily complicated. Come on.
Also an Italian change in the War Council, though. Luigi Cadorna,
Oh, god damn it.
who had been replaced as Italian Army Chief of Staff in November, is now succeeded on the council by Gaetano Giardino.
Okay, thank God.
A few words here in general about Italy. Italy's post-war outlook had been affected quite a bit lately. See, there was always the somewhat delicate question of Italy's aims on the opposite shore of the Adriatic Sea. After having been routed by the Austro-German forces at Caporetto in October and November, the prospects of getting a dividend of territory after the war had dimmed a bit. Allied statesmen didn't really think about it as a big deal at the moment, and American President Woodrow Wilson's 14-point speech a few weeks ago was a bucket of cold water on Italy. Point number 9 said, a readjustment of the frontiers of Italy should be effected on clearly recognizable lines of nationality. So, going by this, Italy wouldn't really have any claim to Istria, Dalmatia, the Isonzo Valley above Gorizia, and certainly not the Greek islands or any of Asia Minor. However, the Treaty of
But they would still get the land that they really want, South Tyrol, right?
London from 1915, signed between Britain, France, Russia, and Italy, had led to Italy joining the war in the first place, and the main lure was promising Italy chunks of Austro-Hungarian land across the Adriatic. Thing is, the United States wasn't bound by that treaty, and Wilson had overcome those in the States who favored neutrality by promising to go to war for a liberal international system that got rid of many traditional causes of war. The U.S. had, in
Halifax death list mounts. Horrifying details. President Wilson signs declaration of war on Austria. War measure passed after short debate. Mayor London, socialist, only member of Congress voting no. Miss Rankin supports bill. La Follette quits chamber. Says Burleson has oppressed postal clerks. President sends message of sympathy to Canada. Storm stops relief plague threatened. Death toll remains at 2,000 as burials are hurried to avoid pestilence while fire sweeps the city. Big offensive on West Front. Is Teuton aim?
December declared war on Austria-Hungary, sure, even though the empire had not attacked America or Americans. Wilson didn't intend to fight the Austrians, but this declaration had been requested by the Italians after Caporetto, partly as a morale boost. Mark Thompson writes, "In truth, American opinion always had misgivings about Italy's aims, which seemed typical of sneaky European statecraft,
Oh,
singing
you
with the
sneaky
anti-imperialist
Europeans, you.
chorus while pursuing a quasi-imperialist role."
I love that. Singing with the anti-imperialist chorus while pursuing a quasi-imperialist role. Wait, no, that's what the Americans do. I mean, who the fuck do you think the Americans learned it from? They learned it from the Europeans. The Americans are doing the same thing in this role. The 14 points essentially gives America greater influence in the world stage. It props them up to usurp the British standing, right? The freedom of the waves benefits the Americans and harms the British. Like America is doing the anti-imperialist chorus while pursuing a quasi-imperialist role here, just not as especially under Wilson. Especially under Wilson. You could really like a lot of people look to in terms of 20th century American imperialism, a lot of people look to Wilson as the start of that. Now, of course, I personally would go further back to even, I would say probably really the true start of American imperialism, of course, was the Spanish-American War, when, America gained its first external, well, also depends on what you want to call external. If you want to call the conquest of, uh, of indigenous Americans, then yeah, that's also external conquest, which is imperialism. Trying to put a definitive point on American imperialism is impossible because really it depends on how you want to look at it. You could argue, I personally would go as far back as possible, right? American imperialism starting with Manifest Destiny and even the 13 colonies, because that is essentially what 13 colonies are. Imperialism, colonialism, blah, blah, blah. What they are. But anyways, the whole, American singing with the anti-imperialist chorus while pursuing a quasi-imperialist role, I think is something that largely started with the president that did the Spanish-American War. I can't forget his name. I can't forget. I can't remember his name. Is it Harrison? I don't know, but yeah. I forgot what my point was.
Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando denied that there was any problem here, sort of non-specifically summarizing Italy's aims as the completion of her national unity and the security of her borders on land and sea. But
yeah, also America can't really go, saying, "Oh, we got to do these natural borders here." Well, then, okay, how about you give the natural borders back to the genocided indigenous people? No, you're not gonna do that. Then why should we listen to you?
at the end of January, Britain and Italy reaffirmed the Treaty of London. But people questioned the discrepancy between this formerly secret treaty, since the Bolsheviks had made it public after the November Revolution, and stated anti-imperialist Allied war aims. I mean, you could only implement the treaty by not implementing any sort of emerging autonomy for nations of the Habsburg Empire. Of course, job one right now was to win the war, and Italy was keeping 44 Austrian divisions away from the Western Front. So as far as London or Paris could soothe Italian concerns, they would. Still, if the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not survive the war, Italy would have to compete for territory with one or even many new nations in the Eastern Adriatic. This explains why Sidney Sonino, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, did not sanction propaganda that would reassure soldiers on the Isonzo front that dreamed of an independent South Slavic state, and he blocked the formation of a Czech and Slovak brigade, wanting the cohesion of the Habsburg Empire to remain strong. But there was a real threat to that cohesion in progress. It'll take a minute to explain.
Dun, dun,
Okay,
dun.
at the end of the week, on the 8th, the Paris press alleges that Lenin and Leon Trotsky, heading the Bolshevik government, are receiving German pay. This is pretty interesting because just now, it's Trotsky who's leading the Bolshevik delegation in peace negotiations with the Central Powers at Brest-Litovsk. And those are becoming a real mess. We've seen earlier that the German and Austrian foreign ministers were talking of peace with no annexations and indemnities while playing a political game with hopeful satellite states whose independent declarations they could secure. Well, when the peace negotiations resumed, the Central Powers dropped the mask. They rejected demands to evacuate the occupied territories before plebiscites were held, maintaining that the inhabitants had already stated their wishes. They stipulated that Russia's frontier should run from Brest-Litovsk to the Gulf of Riga. Okay, this border would suddenly deprive Russia of most of Poland, Lithuania, and Western Latvia. That's tons and tons of land and resources. Trotsky was trying to spin out the negotiations, but German Army High Command was losing patience with all this and wanted clarity in the east. Austrian Foreign Minister Count Ottokar Czernin was also getting antsy with delays because he wanted Ukrainian grain to stave off what he saw as near-revolutionary hunger conditions in imperial cities. Thing is, that food crisis weakened his bargaining power relative to Germany, since German military might was necessary to defend Ukraine from Bolshevik invasion, which had actually been going on for weeks. But it also weakened Czernin's position relative to the Ukrainian Rada, which was demanding the home region of Russian Poland in separate peace negotiations between Ukraine and the Central Powers, claiming that it had an ethnic Ukrainian majority. This, in turn, big house of cards, was a really big deal because giving that land to Ukraine would infuriate the Poles of the Austrian Empire, and the Habsburgs could only rule by consent in the Austrian half of the empire.
I'm trying to follow along as best as I can with how quickly he's going, and I'm not.
Thanks to the Polish parties in the Reichsrat, and conceding to Ukrainian demands could actually deprive Emperor Karl of his final basis of support. As the week ended, it was all coming to a head. But the war was still being fought, and it still had general support. I read this anecdote in Martin Gilbert's The First World War that I thought was quite interesting. Vocal and visible anti-war feeling in Britain was still confined to a few thousand conscientious objectors. They were, though, outraged this week when shoemaker Henry Firth died at the Work Center for Objectors. He had been in prison for 9 months, but became so sick there that he accepted alternative service at the stone quarries on Dartmoor. He collapsed at work and was sent to hospital, where he died. And on the 9th, British philosopher and logician Bertrand Russell...
God damn, motherfucker lived a long-ass time. 1872 to 1970? How?
will be sentenced to 6 months in prison for publicly advocating that the British government accept a German offer to open peace negotiations. And here are some notes to end the week. On the 4th, Alexei Kaledin reportedly gave over control of his Cossacks to Mikhail Alexeyev, who marches on Moscow with 30,000 men. On the 5th, the First Duma of the independent Siberian Republic opens. And also on the 5th, the first American troops killed on their way to Europe die when the British troop ship Tuscania is torpedoed off the Irish coast. 166 American servicemen and 44 British crewmen drowned. And we come to the end of the week with yet more machinations among the Allied high commands, and with peace negotiations leading to an impossible situation for Austria-Hungary. And what could Count Czernin do? If he agrees to give home to Ukraine, he'll lose Polish support, which might ruin the whole empire. If he doesn't, then he might well not get any Ukrainian grain, which might ruin the empire because the Austrians are starving. He can't alienate Germany either because he'll need the German army to keep Ukraine free from the Bolsheviks to get the grain in the first place. But supporting Germany means supporting German territorial demands from Russia, which again means losing the support of a bunch of minorities in the empire, which again might destroy the whole empire. But if you think this is a house of cards, it's not. Remember, the bloody war going on in the field. This is a Game of Thrones. If you'd like to learn more
Oh,
about Italy's story leading up to their entry into the war,
and that was Austro-Hungarian House of Cards / Game of Thrones, The Great War, week 185. This was a good episode. I thought this was a very entertaining episode. Also, one that was a bit difficult to follow at times because of the amount of information that needed to be conveyed. Would have liked it if he had slowed down a tad. But I think this was a time period in YouTube where you really wanted your videos to be around like 10 minutes in length, because also you see this kind of similar thing happen with Geography Now around this time period where the videos are, they try and keep them to a certain length, likely for the algorithm, instead of making them longer, which a shame, but it is what it is. I thought this was still a good week. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.